We are live with breaking archaeology news straight from the hills of Jerusalem. And this incredible find deals with one of the most famous and consequential events in your Bible. Welcome to the Can I Trust the Bible live stream. I am Raj Nair, and on your screen, you will see my brother, Israeli tour guide extraordinaire, Danny the Digger Herman. Danny, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and Chag Sameach. It is also the eve of Yom Kippur tonight.
I know I asked before we got started, I'm like, is it kosher that we're talking right now? But you said, hey, I have some time. So we really wanted to get people this breaking archaeology news. That's kind of the idea of these live streams, is that we want to be the channel when news like this breaks. When it comes to biblical archaeology, we want to give it to you immediately and not just report the news, but have someone like Danny unpack it and explain it. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just click that little button. It really does help us facilitate more conversations like this. And again, that's the goal. We want to be your source for breaking biblical archaeology news. So again, hit that subscribe button. But let's get after it. This news is, the ink is still drying on the press release from the Israel Antiquities Authority. I think they released it maybe a few hours ago on Wednesday or something. But I think we need to set the scene for what this is, and then we'll get right after what they found. This has to do with a very famous event that I think a lot of us, not a lot of us believers, but the skeptics and the haters would say, oh, that's allegorical. That's, the Bible overblew that story. It's not actually what happened. But it's talking about the story of Hezekiah and the Assyrian king Sennacherib. Now, if you pop open 2 Kings 18, you will see the Bible in chapter 5, talking about Hezekiah. It says this: Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. This is a crazy statement. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah. This is a big deal, either before him or after him. He held fast to the Lord and did not stop following him. He kept the commands the Lord had given Moses. Check this out. And the Lord was with him. He was successful in whatever he undertook, but here it comes. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. And one more verse, if you pop over to verse 13. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah's reign, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, attacked all the fortified cities of Judah and captured them. So that's what we're talking about today. This crazy story that eventually ends with, we'll get there. Danny, can you set the scene for what was found?
First of all, what's amazing about this story is that it's not only told to us by the Bible, showing the Judean Jerusalem perspective. We actually found the so-called diary of Sennacherib. We have, through archaeology, a few copies of what's called the Sennacherib's prison. It's really like a cylindrical prison that describes, in his own words, the campaign against the Phoenicians, against the Philistines, and also into the land of Judah, where the famous statement declares, and as for Hezekiah, the king of the Jews, who did not submit to my yoke, I locked him up in his city of Jerusalem like a bird in a cage. Okay, he describes the siege, but what he doesn't tell us is how he eventually conquered. The next sentence returns back to the Philistines and the new order he made there. His silence is very loud. He admits by his silence that he failed to conquer Jerusalem. And of course, you didn't read this, but the Bible eventually tells us that the angel of the Lord struck his army, which is why he retreated. So both sources tell us the same story. Can I trust the Bible? Hell yes. Definitely in this case. Definitely in the 8th century, because we have extra biblical sources validating. And this is one of the best examples. Now, on top of it, we have local archaeology from the Holy Land, which verified it. And first of all, indeed, in many sites that you dig in Judea, in the Shephelah, that region between Jerusalem and the coast, you find clear destruction layers at the end of the 8th century. In fact, in some cities, you find that they created reservoirs and are prepared for a long siege. All of that region was traumatized, and the best example is Tel Achish. Have you ever been to Raj?
I think I might have actually.
Well, even if you have, you should return.
Okay.
Because in recent years, a big budget was given and signs were placed all over the site, and a brand new visitor center has just opened. It's an amazing site to be revisited, even if you've seen it in the past. And it tells more than anything else the story of the Assyrian attack, the siege, the conquest, and the beheaded heads. Everything was found there. It's amazing.
I think one of the really cool things, and the Sennacherib prison to me, as you said, can I trust the Bible, is one of the coolest finds ever. And we're going to get to the breaking archaeology news right now. But here's a point I want to drive home. That 2,700 years ago is almost hard to comprehend, but you have the Bible and you have these prisms written by Sennacherib or maybe one of his scribes lining up. And the crazy part about it is they both agree. If you're the Assyrian king, what do you do if you want to destroy Judea? You destroy their capital, Jerusalem. What do you not find that these prisms say? That he destroyed Jerusalem, exactly like the impossibility of this little Hezekiah to withstand the biggest empire, the most powerful empire, this empire that has been destroying everyone. It's impossible. The Bible says it happened, but there's no way. And then you have these prisms, and it lines up. And to me, archaeology is my favorite apologetic of my Christian faith. For that reason, it's just so cool. But let's talk about, Danny, what they just released, in the past 48 hours. What did they just find?
So they have not conquered Jerusalem itself, but they definitely devastated Judea. And in a way, they rearranged it. All of these areas have become provinces. I mean, we associate that term usually with the Romans, but the Assyrians also created provinces out of this land. Like Megiddo became a head of a province in the north. There's no more kingdom of Israel. And the new discovery gives us two indications. A, that the years before the Assyrians have arrived, there was a massive project of preparing the region for the Assyrian attack. It starts around 4 years earlier when Sargon II, the king of Assyria, is dead in 705. And that's when Hezekiah feels here's an opportunity. Maybe the new king will not be as vicious. Okay, and here's an opportunity. He was also given a promise by the king of Egypt that he will support him. Okay, so he said, here's a good chance. Sennacherib wanted to demonstrate that Hezekiah was dead wrong. Not only is he going to charge all the taxes that he thought he deserves, but he's also going to punish him. And Hezekiah realizes, but the campaign itself, the attack was in 701, meaning there was a span of about 4 years in which Hezekiah could prepare to the best of his ability the region, the city for this attack. That's how Hezekiah's water channel was created. That's how the pool of Siloam was originally created. It was all in that time span, realizing the worst case scenario is about to hit us, let's do our best. Now, even before this new release, we knew that in several digs in this region, we find a lot of jar handles. I even have one in my attic, actually. If you give me a minute,
so cool.
Try and bring it. Where it's stamped, and it's stamped with a specific stamp that indicates it's Lamelech. Lamelech probably meant for the king, meaning for the royal warehouses, in order to distribute whatever the jar contained, wheat, oil, whatever they were planning to store in order to last a long siege. Because back then, you need to understand, wars were not necessarily won by an active attack and death. It was often won by a siege, a long siege. No refrigeration, Raj. No ability to can any food. Okay, can you imagine living, for 2 weeks like this? Often battles were won simply by an effective siege, even in Roman times, by the way. So that was the plan of Sennacherib, and Hezekiah knew he needs to prepare. And wheat is something you can store for a long time. So is oil. So even before this new dig, we knew of the existence of many stamped jar handles with the word Lamelech and sometimes the name of the region where it was produced. This new house found on the outskirts of Jerusalem had two distinct phases. The earlier phase contained several rooms and a lot of broken pottery with those jar stamped handles, seemingly indicating that this is a regional center where all that agricultural produce was collected in order to be distributed or perhaps taken to Jerusalem. So that's interesting by itself. And not only did we find those stamps saying Lamelech, but also other stamps of personal names. It looks like they recruited whoever they could. And then on top of it, it was found in a destruction layer, and on top of it, another building. And that building, we assume, was the Assyrian New Order. Meaning he really devastated the whole land, including that industrial outskirts of Jerusalem where food was prepared for storage. He failed to conquer Jerusalem itself, as we know from the Bible, and Sennacherib himself, but he created a new order of this area just outside the city.
Wow. So this find basically confirms that Sennacherib and the Assyrian army were not only in parts of Judah, but really, really, really close to Hezekiah in Jerusalem. And I think one of the things that you mentioned was the way that Hezekiah prepared Jerusalem. And I think what's really crazy is that when we talk about Hezekiah and Sennacherib, they were contemporaries of Isaiah. And when you ever talk about one of these, old school prophets, it feels like Gandalf here in the United States. It doesn't feel real. It feels so detached and removed. But what's amazing when you're in Jerusalem, and we'll have to make a whole video about this. There's actually this place in the old city of Jerusalem. This gets me fired up, yo. In the Jewish quarter, there's this revealed section of Hezekiah's wall. Like you can see it. They dug down and it's exposed. And there's a verse in Isaiah. I was looking for it. I can't find it, but it basically says this obscure verse: you have broken down the houses to fortify the wall. It says it on this plaque, and then you look down and you see the wall that Hezekiah built, written by Isaiah. So you're probably thinking that Isaiah was like looking at this wall when he wrote it. But here's the crazy part: you have broken down the houses to fortify the wall. Okay, what does that mean theologically? Maybe it just was Isaiah, a very real, tangible human being, explaining a very real, tangible reality. Because if you look at that wall and you kind of peek around the corner, what do you see? You see houses, literally the outlines of houses that have been broken down to fortify Hezekiah's wall. So like you're seeing like an Instagram of the moment that Hezekiah and Isaiah were preparing for Sennacherib's Assyrian army. It's all right in front of you. And I think what's really cool about the find that we found that we're talking about today is it's yet another layer of evidence that when you're reading, sometimes you get bogged down in Second Kings or First Chronicles. You're like, did this actually happen? Look at me, eyeballs. Yeah. Yeah, it happened. You can read you can trust the Bible, the name of the show. And today's kind of obscure find validates this story over and over and over.
Another dimension. Yeah.
It is so exciting. So let me ask you this quick question, Danny. And you've kind of already answered this, but does this find line up with or deny the biblical narrative?
Of course.
How so?
I mean, what else would I need to prove? Sending someone in a time machine to give his testimony? The evidence is overwhelming, and again, it's not the only evidence. It's just one in the layers of evidence coming from underground, above ground, written testimonies, and so on. although the event is really old, 2,700 years ago, the evidence is overwhelming. It's one of those great cases where the Bible and archaeology match so beautifully. We call what I like to call a bingo.
Let's go.
Okay, we don't have such a clear match for Solomon's kingdom, I have to admit. Okay, but you can always argue, 3,000 years have passed. What do you expect? But here, although it's so old, the evidence is there. That's amazing.
And I think what's important is that not only, with Sennacherib's prism, do we know that the Assyrian army was attacking Judea, but now with this find that was, again, released in the past 48 hours by the Israel Antiquities Authority, we can see archaeological proof that they were in the Assyrian army was in the immediate area around Zion long enough to destroy these towers and build their own. And we have archaeological proof that that actually existed, which is amazing. Now, one of the things on this channel that we really like to drive home, Danny, is that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel, is not just the God of 2,000 or 2,700 years ago. He's the God of now. He's alive and active now. He's fulfilling his covenants and his promises now. And Danny, you mentioned before we even got started that this has been a really weird, different, bad, I guess you could say, Yom Kippur than you've ever had in your entire life. So I want to ask you more about that. Again, I know a lot of people will say, just stick with biblical archaeology. To me, that is so demeaning and degrading to the fact that our God is alive and active right now. And again, that doesn't, when we celebrate that God has restored Israel from the four corners, that he's brought, his people back, the remnant from the north, south, east, and west, when he's kept his promises, that there once again there'll be people of ripe old age in Jerusalem. When he keeps these obnoxious promises found in literally almost every book in the Bible, that doesn't mean we're anti anyone else. Quite the contrary. I think there's solutions, and we can be praying for everyone in the land. But I think it's worth celebrating what God's up to. So I think one of the things that we really try to drive home is that archaeology and the fact that there's a Zion right now in the land of Israel, that there are people from Judean descent that are speaking the same exact language, using the exact same currency, worshiping the same God on the same hill, reading the same book for 3,000 years, and it's alive and active right now, screams of God's covenant keeping promise. But Danny, how has this been a strange Yom Kippur?
First of all, I like the fact that you mentioned that we're still using the same currency. You're referring, of course, to shekels. But I have to confess, there was a slight inflation since biblical times. David paid for Mount Moriah 50 shekels. Today, for 50 shekels, you can get a decent bottle of wine, not even a really good one. So it is the same currency, I admit, but not the same value. On a more important note, Yom Kippur traditionally has been a day of contemplation, of being with the community if you're religious in the synagogue, or being with yourself and your family. There's no traffic outside. I don't know if you can hear the silence, if there is such a thing, but there's nothing happening except for emergency. You won't see any traffic out on the roads. Usually, and that's every Israeli's childhood memory. We just go outside walking or on our bicycle because the roads are all clear. And there's no TV and no radio. Even the cables by law do not operate on Yom Kippur. So it's a very special day. And of course, you fast, you ask for people's forgiveness. You're supposed to address the Lord for forgiveness and hope to be judged for the better for the upcoming year. This year we are at war. This is the first time in my life, I'm nearly 57, that I'm experiencing a Yom Kippur where rabbis are instructing the soldiers not to fast. Do not fast, continue eating, okay? Which is amazing. And that's, of course, coming from the Jewish formula that, yes, we have many rules and we should follow them. But pikuach nefesh, meaning in order to save someone life, you can break all the rules. And I remember as a child, my dad was a family doctor. I remember how I was first shocked when he got a phone call on Shabbat and he answered it, even at Shabbat, and then he took the car and drove because it was an emergency. Emergency before everything. And we are in days of emergency, Raj. We are in days of war with 7 fronts, as you mentioned. The worst, potential worst is Iran, although it's now our time to hit back after what they've done. But the Hezbollah is still launching rockets despite losing all its chain of command and so much of its ammunition. It still has some ability and it's still firing. So the soldiers were giving clear orders to continue eating, even and drinking, even that it's a holiday. If they're in Gaza, if they're in Lebanon, if they're along the borders. And even if you're religious people, you are to take your phone with you. Why? Because the phone is that all the phones in Israel are programmed to be giving you an alert if there's a threat of a rocket hitting your way.
Speaking
I
of which,
never thought
Danny,
I would hear this.
you live in
This-
northern Israel, right? So are you safe? Are you seeing any missiles coming in your vicinity?
No, my region is rather quiet, but if the Iranians decide to launch another barrage in our direction, we did actually have a siren a few weeks ago when there was a single rocket coming from Yemen. It fell in the train station next to my town.
Wow.
Okay. But I admit, usually my region, I'm like a suburb of Tel Aviv, it's relatively quiet. But everything is volatile. Everything can change here within minutes. And the fact that religious people on Yom Kippur go to synagogue with a phone in their pocket is really, really unusual.
Wow.
It shows that these are unusual times. And it's also a day of asking forgiveness for us as a nation. You know of whom mostly? Of the hostages and their families.
Wow.
It's been a year, over 365 days already, that these poor souls, people just going out to dance in a music festival, people just hanging in their homes, or soldiers on duty on the border that are being starved in tunnels for over a year, Raj. And we still have not created the conditions to release them. Okay, I think there's a lot of anger among many, many people that the ruling class, the chief, the prime minister has decided, okay, let's stop, let's now talk, let's see if we can negotiate a deal. I'm not naive. I don't think we'll be able to release all of them because for Sinwar, it's the only immunity that he has.
Yeah.
But let's talk. Let's give it a chance. Let's see. Maybe he's in critical condition and he's being more flexible than we think. But it's just not happening. Wow. Okay. In fact, recently the Hezbollah has announced it's willing to discuss ceasefire. Hezbollah, which has always been our biggest nightmare. We have a generator in our backyard. My wife insisted because they said Hezbollah has such rocket capability. We could go out of electricity for at least 72 hours. Maybe some even spoke about 2 weeks. Okay, Hezbollah was the biggest fear besides Iranian creating nuclear capability. And Nasrallah is gone, his deputy is gone, the whole chain of command is gone, and they're actually asking for a ceasefire, not yet officially, but in their own circles. Maybe it's time that we try to negotiate and release some of those poor souls that are locked up. Maybe Yom Kippur will be that day that will give Netanyahu and his head of the government some time to think, contemplate, and come out with a plan headed in that direction.
You know, it's amazing. We're talking about this find that was found about 2,700 years ago. And the king of Assyria, Syria, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon. It also mentions in the Hezekiah story how he had to fight the Philistines in the Gaza area. And it's like, wow, 3,000 years later. and not much has changed. The Philistines and the Palestinians aren't ethnically the same people, but it's just like this crazy idea that no matter where the Jewish people go, and whatever happens, there's always seems to be this war that rages against them, this unreasonable anti-Semitism. But I think in the midst of this fire, that God's shalom protects this people group. We've made a lot of videos about that, and if you are interested in kind of our take on what's happening now, we have a video we released, I don't know, a month ago, talking about how God has restored the Jewish people. And the fact that we're having this conversation on the Day of Atonement is crazy. But Danny, we're going to obviously have to have you back. We have things we've been talking about the Pool of Siloam. So we'll do that in another video. But if you're watching this, please join me in praying for the peace of Jerusalem. Pray for everyone in the Holy Land. Lebanon is mentioned in the Bible a lot. So is the area of Gaza and Judea and Samaria and Syria. And so these are all people that have been created in the image of God. But we pray a supernatural shalom over your people, the Jewish people in Israel. And so, if you're watching this, please be praying, because I don't think it's one of those, oh, pray for me, whatever. I genuinely believe that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is active and alive right now. And the fact that we're having this conversation on the Day of Atonement is just crazy. So Danny, speaking of which, Shabbat Shalom, go be with your family. Love you so much. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Raj Nair. Thank you for watching the Can I Trust the Bible YouTube channel. We hope this video gave you compelling evidence to trust in the validity of the Bible. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. And ask your questions in the comments and share the video with your friends and skeptics. Thanks for watching.